The next alumnus that I'd like to introduce is Henry Brady. Henry Brady, he's being recognized for his contributions to society through his global contributions to education and research and his humanitarian efforts. Henry graduated in 1969 from Harvey College with co-degrees in physics and mathematics. He is currently an esteemed educator, serving as the Dean of the Goldman School of Public Policy and class of 1941, Monroe Deutsch Professor of Political Science and Public Policy at the University of California, Berkeley. It's tough to get that one out. He's also faculty director of Berkeley Survey Research Center and at the University of California and the University of California Data Archive and Technical Assistance Program. He's an eminent and respected researcher, seminal writer on public policy issues. Henry has extensively published on the topics of political methodology, political behavior, and public policy. His work examines the interrelationship between mass public and elites in both the democratic and transitional societies. He's an author or co-author of over 60 professional articles, co-authored several and co-edited several award-winning books. Has also written on public policy topics, including the voting system and social welfare policy, of which he'll go into soon. He's got quite an extensive presentation that really goes into these topics, and I actually wish I had all afternoon to sit around and really view all the great work that he's done. His accomplishments have been recognized by professional organizations and peers. He's a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, a fellow of the American Association for Advancement of Science. He provides extensive service to his community and just is really, his life is about analyzing the interrelationship of public information and really using that for the benefit of society. So please join me in welcoming Henry.
So look, first, what Russ just said was just really quite extraordinary. And I think one of the words he used that's so important in terms of what education is about is giving people courage to do things. And the mechanism by which we do that is not clear. But we do it in some cases, and I think Harvey Mudd did that for me. So I am really thankful for that. And I'm the son of a carpet salesman. My father lost his job when I was at Harvey Mudd in the middle of my 4 years here. I ended up having to support my parents for a lot of years. So this place gave me courage to go on, thinking that maybe I had some talent that would allow me to actually achieve things in the world. And I really thank this place for that. I just briefly want to introduce my wife and my twin brother and his wife, who are in the audience. Raise your hands, guys. So anyway, my twin brother looks nothing like me, but he is my twin brother. And he's an extraordinary educator, by the way. He was a high school teacher for many years, just won a whole lot of awards in Palm Desert upon his retirement, is in their Hall of Fame and so forth. And he's the one who's really made contributions to humanity in extraordinary ways. Okay, I just wanted to give you a little idea of myself. Confession, I'm a nerd. I guess that's not a big confession here, but it's true. I want to just review some nerd milestones in my life. In third grade, I asked for and got a Betty Crocker cooking set for Christmas. This is the 1950s. My twin brother was mortified. And here's the good part, he now loves to cook. Who was right about that? Then in fourth grade, I write an essay called, this was an airplane that was out there. It's a supersonic. It was a wonderful airplane. It was called the B-58 Hustler. And so I wrote an essay called Henry, the B-58 Hustler. Completely oblivious to what that might possibly mean. No idea whatsoever. And as my first HMC roommate, Tom Ratty, can well attest, I was certainly naive. Around fifth grade, I got a Gilbert chemistry set and radioactive materials from the Atomic Energy Commission. I was trying to construct a cloud chamber. I actually did. My mother had to run around getting dry ice all the time to cool it down and so forth. So I handled radioactive materials, rather oblivious to the warnings of the labels. So far, so good. We'll see. No idea what I was exposed to. In high school, I took chem study, actually in draft form, before the book had actually been published. But it was designed, you may remember, by Glenn Seaborg from Berkeley and Arthur Campbell, J. Arthur Campbell from here. And then later I met him. This is the picture you saw earlier of the original faculty. There's J. Arthur Campbell with Joe Platt on the right. So I enrolled at Harvey Mudd College, the best thing I ever did in my life, except marrying my wife, which is really the best thing. It was the second best thing I did. It was the best thing I'd done up to that point. And I found this place, Nirvana North for Nerds. And by the way, keep the dorms the way they are. They were just wonderful then. You don't have to upgrade them. This younger generation has to learn to live a Spartan lifestyle. But it really was, we thought it was wonderful. We loved it. And then I met Joe Platt. And he was a remarkable human being. He is a person who, I really think to myself, what would Joe Platt do as an educator? And there's a nice picture of Joe really showing him smiling and the wonderful personality he had. I learned from the physics faculty. This is a picture taken in '64. I took courses from almost everybody there. I list them at the bottom. I added Graydon Bell, who was already here but not in the picture. I think he must have been on leave that year. And I learned a lot from Graydon Bell as well. And then two others that mattered. Bob Borelli, many of you know, fabulous teacher, taught me an enormous amount of math and about life and living through late night conversations when sometimes he was in his office working hard, actually trying to get tenure at the time. But the other person you may not know, George McKelvey. George was the first development director here, very conservative. He was a boxer in his youth. He and I disagreed vehemently on the Vietnam War, but we became friends. And it's indicative of the kind of place that Harvey Mudd is, that George befriended me, and we had lots of discussions about the topic, but always in a very genteel, understanding, useful way. And I just learned a lot from George, and I wanted to remember him for all he did for me, and I think for the college as well. Okay, then after graduation, I spent a year at the Theological Seminary and came back to Harvey Mudd just to walk around, really. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. I was pretty lost, actually. And I see Joe Platt on his bicycle. He comes riding by, he stops, he says hello, remembered me by name, which was wonderful. And he says, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm not sure yet. I'm pretty confused, blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, you always wanted to work in Washington. Would it be nice if you got a job in Washington? I said, well, that'd be great. Okay, so I go away. Within a week, I get a phone call. I had an internship at the National Science Foundation, and that really started my interest in social science. I worked with a man named Nuri Aborn, who ran the sociology program and he had me write a paper on social indicators and statistics, and that was the beginning of my interest in social science. So that was wonderful. And then I've written a few books. There they are. I like the one with the red cover the best, actually, just because of the cover. You fall in love with your books for the covers. But there are all sorts of different topics: Canadian elections, campaigns, political methodology, and so forth. I've written a lot of papers on quantitative methods. This is where my Harvey Mudd education was essential. I got into political science and economics at a time when there was more math and economics than there was in political science, especially. But I brought techniques into political science that were frankly second nature because of the education I'd gotten at Harvey Mudd, but were revelatory to many of the people in my discipline. So it's really simply because I went to Harvey Mudd that I got a chance to be a trailblazer. I started a group called the Political Methodology Society, which really tried to help advance the cause of new techniques in the social sciences. And then I wrote a bunch of things. I'm editor of the Oxford Handbook of Political Methodology, Cyber Infrastructure in the Social Sciences, and then a book, Rethinking Social Inquiry. These are all books about how we can do social science better, to be honest, so that it really tells us something about how the world works. And so we can be sure of our inferences, that A really causes B, not just some blabber about that, but real evidence that proves that A causes B. And in fact, here's a paper I wrote about causation and explanation in social science. How can we actually make causal statements about social science? Once again, my Harvey Mudd background was essential because it gave me the scientific understanding to know what a good inference looked like. And the courage to tell people a lot of what you're coming up with are not good inferences. Let's do it better. Why is this important? Well, ultimately, I care a lot about public policy. I want to make it better And to make it better, I believe we need to use evidence, we need to have models and statistical methods to pin down what works and what doesn't work, and develop performance standards for government. Now here I'm not arguing with Russ. I think he's got an important point to make, that there are things we do that are almost impossible to measure. But I do think we've got to measure at least some of what we do, and try to measure, try to get a grip on it, because otherwise we're going to end up maybe not doing what we want to do. We don't want to be slavish about those numbers. That's what's wrong with No Child Left Behind. We became slavish about measures. What measures are for is you see that something is good or bad according to the measure, and then you ask, is it a good measure? By the way, the value-added measures in education, one of the members of my faculty has written the definitive papers which prove there's more noise than signal in those value-added measures. And it really is true. There's just more. I mean, it's not that he thinks it's a bad idea. He just says you can't do it because there's more noise than signal. That's what careful analysis can tell you if you look at it. So the test may be good for saying something about a whole school, but even there you have to ask yourself, who is the school teaching and why is it that way? So these numbers should be the basis for a conversation, not the basis immediately for, oh my gosh, you didn't hit that standard, we're going to punish you. It's a basis for a conversation about how to get better, or what's wrong with the measure, or whatever. Okay, so let me just give you a very quick example here to show you the kind of thing I do. Here's about unemployment and welfare caseloads. A confession here, I thought that the 96 changes in welfare law were a bad idea at the time. I was wrong. Turns out I think by and large they were good. I think there were some aspects of them that really were not so good, but basically speaking, the welfare reform that said people should work and we should get them to work is a good idea. But this is about a slightly different issue. And it turns out in some places, this is Colusa County, California, where they grow rice. They use the Sacramento River water for that purpose. Here's the unemployment rate in Colusa County. What you'll notice is one high frequency signal, that's seasonal effects. There's tremendous agricultural cycle. There's times when you can work and times when you can't work. And those indeed do go up to 35% unemployment there. And there's a longer term cycle, which by the way is the business cycle. You see the lower frequency? There's the same plot over the same time period for the two-parent caseload of welfare in Colusa County. Well, what you notice is they look pretty much like they're highly correlated. So one of the questions is what's going on here? And what's going on is if you look at those, what you do is take the averages over each month for each of those years, and then this is just monthly plots, the 12 months. So on the left is average unemployment, on the right is average welfare caseload for each month. And then we can even get a little trickier and look at the lowest unemployment is in August, and the lowest caseload is in October, 2 months later. By the way, the highest unemployment is in January, the highest welfare is 2 months later. Well, that's pretty convincing evidence. And by the way, I have much more convincing evidence I could give you, but you don't want the 2-hour version of this, which shows that this is really what's going on. People lose their job because of the agricultural seasonal cycle, and they go on welfare. Well, you might say, well, why don't they just get unemployment insurance? They're not covered by unemployment insurance. They're one of the groups that are excluded from unemployment insurance in the United States. So the right answer to this problem is let's include agricultural workers under unemployment insurance. Then they'll get off welfare. But you can't expect them to get off welfare in these kinds of counties unless you have something to solve the agricultural cycle, seasonal cycle. And by the way, the growers are happy, really, to have them go on welfare because they want that group of people to be available when it's time to pick the crops. So the welfare system is subsidizing the growers in these counties. And the right way to do it would be to have unemployment insurance which taxes the growers and says, okay, since you're making use of these people for your purposes, you should pay for their unemployment. That makes it possible for them to stick around and pick your crops. So that's, by the way, going to increase agricultural costs, but it should. That's called internalizing the process. Right now, what happens is the growers externalize the costs of this reserve army of the unemployed onto the public through the welfare system. Now, this doesn't happen everywhere. Not all welfare is like this, but some welfare is like this, and you should know that. So that's evidence being brought to a policy area and trying to make an argument about what the policy should be. So that, by the way, just puts them together and shows you that basically they're the same curves. One just lagged 2 months with respect to the other. Okay. Well, let me just skip. I got all this other stuff. This is the butterfly ballot, by the way. I'm just going to show you a picture of it. I did work on this, and what me and my co-authors showed was that definitively it looks like about 2,000 people voted for Pat Buchanan instead of Al Gore. They were actually Gore voters. I'd written a memo about 2 days after the election that I put on the internet and the Thursday after the election, making this claim using some quick data analysis and model building I did. Later, we did a definitive paper where we actually looked at ballots and found out there were lots of people who voted Democrat on every office, but at the top of the ticket they voted for Buchanan. That was true with respect to the butterfly ballot, that was the in-person voting. But if you actually went and looked at the absentee ballot, which didn't have that problem of this crazy ballot, you didn't find those people who voted for all Democrats down the ticket voting for Buchanan. Virtually none of them voted for Buchanan. Looks like Gore lost about 2,000 votes. You might remember he lost the election by 537 votes in Florida. So just an interesting historical fact. It turns out that, and this is just some of the data that show that. So I'm going to skip all that. What I'm going to end with is just show you one other thing. And I don't have time to really explain this, but this is a two-dimensional picture of American politics, and basically it's how you feel about economics, how you feel about social issues, and the lower left-hand corner is where liberals would be, and the upper right-hand corner is where conservatives would be. And the dotted lines are where various groups within the Republican and Democratic parties stand, and where they stood, actually, between 72 and 84. And you notice they're opposed to one another, they're in different places. What's remarkable is how much the polarization has occurred when you now look at the 92-04 period. And I could update this and it would even look worse. And what the trick here is to look at the length of those lines. There's a lot bigger distance between the parties than there used to be. That's political polarization in America. This is a tragedy for America and a real problem and a real concern and something that I've written about. I don't know how to solve the problem. One answer would be to get rid of the filibuster, by the way, I think. And this is just a picture from Alexander Calder, famous artist, which I think depicts. He did this in the 60s, but he knew about polarization in America, that it was coming, Democrats on the left, Republicans on the right. Thank you.